Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural Electoral Area Services Committee for the SCRD. We've got an echo issue here in the room we're going to deal with while I bring the meeting to order. It's 9:31. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the traditional territories of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us today, and directors, unless there's any amendments to make to the agenda, I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. Next up, I will ask for a motion to receive the report and delegation materials, please. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Our first delegation is Kelsey Oxley from the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association regarding a disc golf course proposal for Connor Park. So I've just promoted Miss Oxley into the meeting, so it'll just take a second.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here also in the gallery. I have some members of the Disc Golf Association. So I'll just introduce us briefly. My name's Kelsey Oxley, as you say. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association. We're a grassroots players organization that started in 2019. We have an MOU with the SCRD for Shirley Macy Park Disc Golf, which we have been enjoying an agreement there for some time now. And we are looking in this delegation to begin the conversation for a second course on the Sunshine Coast. This one would be in Area B in Connor Park, and the exact location within that space would be yet to be determined. We're just looking to open the discussion again. This is our second time applying for a disc golf course in Area B. However, we have refocused our objective to a smaller, more family-friendly beginner 9-hole adjacent to the school. And as you can see in the information that was attached to the agenda, disc golf is a very accessible, very low barrier sport that is very family friendly and also accessible to all ages and a variety of fitness levels. It's easy to start with just a single disc and walking down a trail and throwing towards a target amongst the trees. We've seen tremendous growth in the sport locally and within our organization. We just hosted a large tournament this past weekend. We have over 40 registrants despite the torrential rain over at Shirley Macy. And I have letters of support attached in time to attach to this delegation agenda. I was only able to attach the one from the Half Moon Bay Community School, but I do also have one from the Half Moon Bay Community Association. And I have a letter of support from Trail Bay Source for Sports as well that I can forward it today if requested. And so I'd like to just describe what we would like to do and why we're choosing that location. We've refocused and scaled down since our last application. We are looking to work strictly within the boundaries of Connor Park, so utilizing the existing parking and the existing facilities, and to construct in consultation with other user groups to see where we would have the least impact on other trail users, to construct 9 holes, likely adjacent to the field on the north side, not to interfere with the walking trails on the lower side of the field. And this would enable a lot more recreation in that section of park. And it would also, the letter from the School of Support describes how the Disc Golf Association has started a disc golf club at Half Moon Bay Elementary, and every Wednesday, a couple of our members coach the kids, and they're using just portable baskets on the Half Moon Bay field at the moment. They've had really good engagement there. They have an incredible turnout from the kids. And what we're looking for is to build a course that would be accessible by the school near enough that the kids could use it during gym class, and then also with families and friends outside of school hours. It would encourage them to have a sport that's really a lifelong fitness activity. And as always, disc golf, when it's in public parks, as it is all over the province, it's not exclusive access, it's not gated, there's no fees, this is strictly public. And the SCDGA would like to enter into an MOU to do it. And so we would take on the construction, maintenance, and any repairs needed to do this project. So we're not asking for any large capital outlay from the SCRD. And I believe that's all I have to say. So I'd like to just open it up for questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Oxley. Directors, any questions for our delegation? Director Pratt?
It really is Half Moon Bay Day today, so this is great. Thank you, Kelsey, for the presentation. And I think my next question my question would really be to staff on what would be the next steps in putting this forward. Thanks.
Just take a second. Our staff are unfortunately having to share one microphone today. So.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the question. This, a similar report, although albeit larger in scale, certainly was presented to the board, I believe, less than a year ago. And at the time, I believe there were a number of actions that staff had suggested needed to happen before further development of the park should occur, including a management plan and community engagement. We have not done any of that work. We haven't prioritized that work yet. So we still feel it's sort of missing from the equation prior to any further development. So if that is a priority to move forward in terms of a management plan on Connor Park, then that is certainly the board's prerogative to put that forward as a resolution or a direction to staff. But at this point in time, we've focused our efforts on Shirley Macy. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
I thought Director McMahon was ahead of me, but she somehow snuck behind me. I personally am a fan of disc golf, and I like the idea. I do recall the report that was presented a year ago, and I don't know to what extent. I want to go back over the same questions that we had back then, but I see it's fairly low impact. I haven't walked the site. How much brush clearing and how much land alteration is actually necessary other than putting those hoops in? Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Oxley, do you know the answer to that?
There would be some limited brush clearing along fairways. There's no tree removal. We're not clearing. The word fairway is a bit misleading. It's not the same as a ball golf course. This is just a trail within the forest. There would be some clearing of salal and things. The last time we did this proposal, we started well before the pandemic. So, although I know the staff report did not come in till last year, the last project started a very long time ago. And we learned a lot about that, and one of the main objections was that the Welcome Woods piece of land has a covenant which cannot be further developed. And so this proposal is quite different in that it's strictly Connor Park, and to alleviate any confusion that did cause last time. But yes, no tree removal, and we do not have a trail map, like a trail map proposed, as we would like to work with local naturalists and people from the Sargent Bay Trail Society to identify areas that would have the least impact on the local environment there.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Sure. I don't have a lot of questions. I'm not familiar with Connor Park, but I am familiar with the disc golf thing in Shirley Macy Park, and I hike through there fairly regularly. It seems to be very successful. And I just want to say that, you know, we often get proposals from organized sport. I'm a big fan of disorganized sport. You know, things like skateboarding and disc golf that are organized by the users on their own time and available anytime, as you said, not gated for anybody to enjoy. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Hiltz.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. In your presentation, it says exploding growth. So could you just kind of say how much, what constitutes exploded growth?
I mean, when we started the Disc Golf Association, it was my husband and I were the first two members, and we were sort of just gathering together a group of guys that hung out. We have over 60 members now, dues-paying members, and additional, people beyond that. Our tournaments regularly bring in, over 40 people, and that's tournaments. We also hold tags on Wednesdays, which bring in like it's an informal league. It's doesn't require sign up or commitment. And we see, I think on average there's about 20 people there, but we're early in the season yet this year. I do have a letter from Josh Romer, of the co-owner of Trail-Based Source for Sports, and he wrote to the testament that it does support the local economy as well. And it says, as recently as 3 to 4 years ago, the average disc sales were approximately 100 per year. They now sell between 1,000 and 1,500 discs per year out of Trail-Based Source for Sports just here on the coast. So, I mean, that's a tenfold increase over the last 3 to 4 years. And I think it's probably fair to say that represents the number of players easily. And I mean, in Shirley Macy Park, it's almost, 20 times the number of people playing. The Disc Golf Association has a little basket on the back of the Hole 1 archway sign with some free discs to try, and it says, take one and try it. And we've had great uptake of that. People can go with no financial commitment whatsoever and try a new sport. And I think that's pretty unique to disc golf in how accessible it is to all economic levels.
And a follow-up on, so how many people can use like a 9-hole course at one time, like a comfortable level for participation?
I mean, a maximum load when you're doing a tournament would be 4 people per hole, just as golf is played in a similar idea, 4 people per card advancing along. So, I mean, you're looking at 36, but it's not typically played like that. And I mean, you could put as many as, up to 60 people on a course at a time, but I mean, that's really pushing it. So, I mean, if we're putting, say, 40 people on a max load at the course, the parking that is at Connor Park would be completely reasonable.
Can I ask another?
Go for it.
The public aspect of it is interesting. And has your group explored provincial crown lands and provincial tenures to use on provincial land and just how did that go? Thanks.
Absolutely. I have a Crown Land license application in front of the ministry right now. We've made it through the first couple steps, and they've told me to expect 2 years before I get my answer. So, I mean, it's all of these things do take a significant amount of time. We're exploring options on a few different fronts, but this location particularly is important to our community in that the school would be able to utilize it because they do have a lot of interest in their disc golf club is really, really engaging kids.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you. this will be a combined question to Kelsey as well as to staff. Has, while we're working through the management plan for Connor Park, is there a possibility of doing a temporary, maybe smaller course, like a 3 to 6 hole that is considered more temporary? Has that option been explored? Well, just while the management plan for the park is being completed, while still maintaining the momentum that the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association is already working on and already has in the community.
I mean, all the options are open. We're just looking to restart the conversation and redirect it to a more appropriate scale for the park. We understand that the last proposal did have some opposition and that there was no comprehensive parks management plan. The SCDGA would be happy to place temporary targets. We can place something called tonals instead of baskets. The tee pads don't have to be poured concrete. They can be gravel that could be easily removed. We'd be happy to look at that. I do think 9-hole, if we just make them short 9s, is still probably about the lower limit of the number we would like, just to avoid conflict and to maintain interest. 9 holes only takes, I mean, depends on your pace, but if you're, an intermediate, 9-hole is probably only going to take you an hour and a half anyway. So less than that is sort of not enough engagement.
Thank you. Ms. Gagnon, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, and thanks, Kelsey, for that answer. I think that's the conversation has not started, and that's what Kelsey is trying to say is, can we initiate a conversation? Because we haven't done any discussion. We left it, we're sort of where we were at in June of 2021, and that there's no management plan. There's lots of archaeological and environmental considerations that would need to be made even for a temporary course. We all know that to put any type of hole in the ground or even something on top of the ground that covers the ground requires archaeological and permits, etc. So we can certainly, if it's the board direction to add this to the list of community requests that we have, we can certainly look at triaging it and then see where it fits in the 2023 onward planning in terms of priorities, and the board can wrestle with that decision at budget time if that is the desire. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd personally be swayed to try it, and then if there's larger community opposition, then we can rethink it. That being said, I do want to respect that archaeological and environmental considerations need to be part of that equation. So I'd be in favor of a motion that would say let's have the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association start communicating with staff around a small temporary course, or not temporary, but a small course that on a trial basis. But I will also defer to the area director because she probably has more expertise on the feedback that she's received so far.
Director Pratt?
Thanks, voluntold. Yes, I'm heavily in support of the Disc Golf Association moving forward because this is a low barrier sport. This is it's very accessible. It's a great location for it where it is at Connor Park. So I would very much, I think we would probably reword the motion because we can't really direct the Sunshine Coast Golf Association to communicate with our staff, but we can ask our staff to communicate with the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association and look at a potential budget proposal for 2023. Is that too far along? Is that too specific? To look at potential for moving forward with disc golf in Connor Park? What would staff like?
I would think a motion to just refer this to staff would be
probably
sufficient.
be the best. Okay, so we'll refer this to staff. Would be the motion then.
Are you making that motion, Director
I
Pratt?
am making that motion.
Okay, and I see a seconder for that. I see Director McMahon's hand up.
Well, that's a nice vague motion. I can support that, but I was just reminded that we have a policy normally that we don't make motions as the result of delegations. We move things forward via staff reports and so forth. So just a process piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Pratt?
I think we've had past staff reports on this, and there's been, so this is more, to my mind, this is more of a follow-up based on previous presentations, on previous engagement. So I think this is just, for me, it's not so much on the delegation, it's about, it's the continuing the conversation and asking staff to continue to follow up on something that we've already started.
All right, thank you. Director Hiltz, did you have a question?
After the motion.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question on this. This is electoral area directors only, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, parks management plans. I think we only have maybe one right now. That's Cooper's Green, I'm thinking, two. Shirley Macy, I don't think is in it, I don't think. So how does staff manage parks without master plans, I guess? How do they put all this together? And what is the timeline for having plans? Like every little park would have one? I'm just wondering, could you just put a little context around that master plan for parks thing?
Ms. Gagnon.
I'll give you an Alberta perspective on it from what I'm familiar with. We do have a master plan. It's the 2014 Recreation and Parks Master Plan that classifies our parks and provides an inventory of those parks, where they sit in the classification, and very high-level service levels that go along with that. Then if you want to further develop a park or enhance a park or increase that service level, you typically develop a management plan around it, or a enhancement plan, which I believe was done for Cliff Gilker and for Cooper's Green. Those are the two that we have. So if there's another park that we want to relook at to make changes to what exists in the park, to add amenities to that park, you typically would do some type of master planning around that park. Here in BC, you call it, I believe, here we call it management plans. I'm used to calling them park enhancement plans. But it would entail a consultant that comes in, takes a look at the park, lots of community engagement in terms of what is it the community would be supportive in that park, what do we need, what are the additional community assets that we need, which is even a bigger question beyond one individual park. But that's kind of the flow of how park planning would go, and then that enhancement plan would come back to the board to adopt, and that would be then used by parks to plan for future enhancements, capital investments, operational investments, that type of thing. So hopefully that's an explanation for you. Director Hiltz, thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. I was operating under the impression that we would only have management plans for the significant parks. We also have a lot of tiddly little parks. So I was just curious, would we have like the tiddly little park plan just for all the, swing set ones that are postage stamp size, or would we have a whole management plan for every park? Just curious, thank you.
That's a great question, thank you. We have regional district parks that typically would have a management plan, of which we have two. We have all the way down to what we classify as neighborhood lots, and then down to green spaces, and typically you wouldn't have a park management plan around those more a green space, for example, is supposed to be environmental in nature. We're conserving it. There's not a lot of development in it. So yes, it would make sense that you start at your regional district classification of park for your management plan, of which I believe Connors Park and Welcome Wood would fall into that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Seeing no other hands up from directors, thank you, Ms. Oxley, for presenting to us today. And
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
enjoy the rest of your day. So moving on, we've got a second delegation, Andy Jones-Cox from the Half Moon Bay Community Association regarding the Cooper's Green Hall project. We're just going to take a second to get set up here, and I think we've got to disconnect that laptop from audio. All right. Good morning, Andy. I'll just get you to turn on your microphone there. There you go.
There we go. All right.
All right. It's over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to make this presentation today. The Half Moon Bay Community Association has been working to see this project for Cooper's Green Hall replacement completed. The work's been going on for 7 years or so. I have with me Linda McMahon, our president, and Don Cunliffe. Linda and I are relatively newcomers. Don has been working on this since about 2014. At this stage, first of all, I want to tell you that I'm very optimistic about this project. In spite of the increased estimate for the project, as I'm sure you are aware, I'm very optimistic, and I want to show you why. This is an overview of what I plan to present today. Talk about the importance of Cooper's Green Hall to Half Moon Bay, and the extraordinary importance. Talk a little bit about the old hall, what the new hall will bring to our community, and what extraordinary difference it will make. I want to talk about how the things that are going to be needed to get shovels in the ground and how much we support those things to happen. And then finally, and I want to focus on the last part for the most, which is the 2021 budget and some of the proposed solutions. We recognize that the funding gap is a big challenge, but we think there are ways to get there, which are maybe more palatable than some folks might think. So I have only lived in Half Moon Bay. I don't know what it's like in other small communities, but in Half Moon Bay, the hall is extraordinarily important place. It's a hub of activity because there isn't an alternative in our community for anywhere to meet, anywhere. So there are no other meeting rooms to rent. There's no coffee shop at the moment. There might be soon, but at the moment there is no coffee shop where you can go and meet a friend over coffee. There's no family restaurant to take the family out. In fact, there's no undercover meeting space at all in a community of 3,000 people. So the new Cooper's Green Hall can bring this community together and help to make it truly a community, a place for meetings, activities, performances, small meetings, large meetings, and you combine that with the facility of Half Moon Bay, of Cooper's Green Park, and this can be the place that makes our community so important for us. The old hall that we have existing, it used to fill this function, at least in part. It was a smaller community at that time, but it was long ago, and it's simply no longer a place that can do the things that I've just described. Right now, the Half Moon Bay Community Association is focusing on outdoor events, and that photograph in the slide is an example. We want to build community, and we don't have a place to build it indoors, so we're focusing on what we can do, which is the outdoors aspect. This was a photograph from an event we had last year. It was called the Seaside Shuffle. People love coming together in Half Moon Bay, and this was at a time when we thought COVID was maybe on the way out, and we were first allowed to meet, and we have dozens of photographs like that. You'll see a couple more, and the smiles on everybody's faces were phenomenal. People love to meet, and right now we only have outdoors to do it in. So this is what I call community making the best that we can. for the moment. So it sounds like an argument of convenience for somebody like myself who is very much in support of the new Cooper's Green Hall. I'd like briefly to show you what we have currently. This is our existing hall. There's a few photographs. I won't spend a lot of time on any of them. You can see that not a lot of maintenance has happened in the last few years, naturally, I guess, because there's been anticipation of a replacement of it. This is the kitchen. And keep in mind, if you rent the hall, it's not expensive, but if you rent the hall by the hour, by the day, this is what it looks like when you walk in there. The kitchen is, I didn't plan to say it, but it's horrible. This is what the bathroom looks like. Everybody has their own views of what, how acceptable or unacceptable it is, but nobody could say that this is a place to be proud of. Outdoor view. Okay, I won't go over any more photographs, excuse me. Sorry about that. So what will the new hall bring? These bullet points are an excerpt, slightly paraphrased, from the proposal that we have been discussing with staff about operating the hall in the future, which you may be aware of. These are some of the things that we anticipate as uses of the hall. We envision, as I said, the place where people can meet in our community. We envision a hub of activity, a busy schedule with all kinds of things from small meetings to it could be business events, private family, birthday parties. We have particular interest as a commercial kitchen is included, especially as that aspect of place to meet. We would see the commercial kitchen on occasion being used in concession style for small vendors to be able to operate a coffee shop for one day a week, or maybe several of those, that kind of thing. And the design allows that, ideally, to a covered deck and also to a larger patio. The larger patio is not included in the budget currently. Given the opportunity, the community association would fund the development of the patio in the near future after completion of the hall. So basically we're looking at very versatile space that can be used indoors, outdoors, semi-outdoors, food preparation and service indoors or outdoors, to the park, to the hall, etc. So I'm very impressed with the design that was created in the first place. Now, I guess 4 years later, we have the detailed design, much more detailed design, and it ideally serves what is needed in our community. We want to get the shovels in the ground, and I know there's pent up urgency from people in the community. We really, really want to. So I guess I focus on bullet point number 1, which is option number 1 among your options today. To my mind, to our mind, is the right option, and we're excited to have the opportunity to participate in the creation of this building, and that's what we would like to do. The price tag is big. No doubt people have read it, and as soon as you read it, you think, oh my gosh, look at the prices. Maybe we were all looking at this with kind of rose-tinted glasses last year when we thought that we had 2018 estimates, and somehow we thought that in 2021 the budget for this thing wouldn't have changed very much. And we get to 2022, and it has changed a lot. But this is the way the world is now. It's not the way Cooper's Green is now. It's everything has changed. We should be looking at those increases as being alarming as they are. They are increases from 2018 to 2022. Not from 2021 to 2022. So we recognize that you have difficult choices to make. It's not at all easy. None of the options is ideal. They've got disadvantages and they've got advantages, all of them. But we sincerely think that the first option is the only option that should result. all the other three options leave a great big question, and that great big question is, so what should we do instead? Can we cancel the project and stick with the old hall? Well, I think I've explained why I don't think that's right. But the other options also leave that question. What should we do if we don't have a new hall? But the good news, and why I feel optimistic about it, is that it can be done by filling that budget gap in other ways. The natural thought is, oh my God, it's another $1 million. The taxpayers can't bear that. We don't think the taxpayers should be asked to bear that. So I don't pretend to be an expert, and I know that staff none of the staff have seen this chart until this very moment, or at least when they looked at the handout that I gave you. The 2021 column, in rough terms, is the way the budget looked last year when you approved it with conditions. The first 2022 is the very same set of funding options with the new cost, and that great big thing called funding gap, $983,000. And the second 2022 column shows some suggestions for how that can be significantly changed. Recognize that some of our numbers here are not sort of based in fact. They are estimates and projections, things that we feel we are capable together of coming to. So I want to finish on this last slide. Oh, sorry, one thing I should have mentioned is, because I love all the photography, I didn't even touch on the photography here, but there's just some of the examples of all the people that love making their community happen. So, sorry, I should have mentioned that. So in the last slide, where are we? Which is here. So I just put some notes here. I'm not going to go into detail, obviously don't have the time to do that, but I hope you will take note of the fact that some of these things, but I'll touch on them very, very briefly, however. So 32% increase in the project cost. That equates almost exactly to 7% annually from 2018 to 2022. That's a lot, kind of alarming, but it isn't 32% in a year. We should realize that, I think. As far as fundraising goes, we have raised well over the $345,000 which we committed to and is in trust with the SCRD, ready to go. We stopped fundraising about a year ago because we realized that people were getting tired of being asked to donate to a project when we couldn't say, yes, it's going ahead. When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? What's it going to result in? We couldn't give them firm answers, so it's very difficult to ask. But if there was a commitment today or sometime very soon that the project is going ahead, we would open the door again. We would be very active, seeking donations from folks in our community who are very generous, and we think we can far, far outstrip that 32% increase. We don't believe we can make $1 million in fundraising, but we believe we can make a big contribution to that. So that's the second note. The third note is about gas tax, which, and I'm not an expert, I don't know what the regulations are about how gas tax can and cannot be used, but it appears sensible. There's $1.3 million in the gas tax fund for Half Moon Bay, and if we don't use it for this project, then what would we ever use it for? This seems to be the ideal thing. So a substantial part of those costs, basically, which are not eligible for the ICIP grant, and including in Note 6 some of those other related costs to do with parking, septic field, archaeological survey, which, as far as I know, not all of those items were in the budget, the 4.07 million budget. The ICIP grant, this is, I have to defer to people who understand the grant regulations a lot better than I do. The ICIP grant was the maximum at the time, which was 73.3% of the project estimate, which was 3.088 million. That estimate is now 4.071 million. As far as I know, that we are not when I say we, you are not constrained from seeking grants for what is now a gap, because that 73.3% of the project cost is now 52% of the new project cost. There's a gap there which I think can be filled by other grants. Have to defer to other people for the certainty of that. And those things all contribute to finding contributions to the funding gap other than asking the SCID to take out more short-term debt. So in this scenario, it's just one scenario, instead of $983,000, that could be reduced to something more like $169,000. That's what I have here. So all that is to say, we think there are ways to fill that gap. We would love to work together with you. We have a part to play, and we would encourage the SCID board to approve the project. Go with option one. Perhaps that suggests risk. I don't know, and I know that's not something which anybody bears happily, but this project has been waiting to get to go for a long time, and I, amongst many other people in Half Moon Bay, believe that this is the time to say yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Directors, let's see if I can get your screen share stopped here. There we go. Directors, any questions for our delegation? Director Ties?
Ooh, yeah, I guess I should have raised my hand instead of turning the microphone on. My question is, and I don't know if that's a question to staff or you or both, how was the $981 per square foot reached and justified? I've consulted with several builders on this, and you don't like my comments? They all think that's too high, and that's my opinion as well. So, just how is that justified?
Thank you for the question, Director Ties. I'm actually going to ask you to hold that one until we get to the staff report. Right now, we're trying to keep the questions to delegation related.
Okay, I thought maybe they had some answers, but
I
The community association doesn't have insight to that. We rely on staff and on the contractors who have made the estimates. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, Director Hiltz?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and I absolutely agree. Community halls are central to the community, and it reminds me of at the beginning of the term, the Grantham's Hall was going through what was called a rehabilitation. That hall had historical aspects to it, so it was not a tear down. It was nearly $600,000 to keep it standing. So I'm very supportive of community halls. And there's a wide range on the coast and on the islands of how they're run and how they're financed. And this one for the regional district is kind of co-modeling. I'm interested in how the community association sees their role in booking and providing equal access, because the idea is to have more of a regional center. And it is a gorgeous site, that waterfront, it's to be cherished, absolutely. Grantham's Area F doesn't have anything on the water. Area E has some water, so how do you see that kind of co-management and access to other folks on the Sunshine Coast? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. We have been in discussion with staff for the past almost 12 months, I believe, about the nature and how such a relationship would work. There's not a conclusion to that. Obviously, if there was, then you would have heard about it already. But I think we're reasonably well down the road understanding. We have offered and are willing to step forward to be the managers of the whole, so to speak. So under a long-term operating agreement, we would have probably a part-time manager who would oversee the operation. We would use a group of volunteers. We have a wonderful base of volunteers in the community, and we would ask people to take on a specific role to help us with the management of so everything to do with bookings. And we have already set down some of the principles under which those things would work. We've even got as far as sort of thinking about a model for costs and the price of rentals and those kind of things. They're not finalized by any means, but we would certainly we'd have some definition between not-for-profit versus for-profit, that kind of thing. We'd have hourly and daily rentals. And we would be managing that on behalf of the SCRD. SCRD staff would not be required for anything other than we would have a joint operations management committee, which would meet probably monthly to begin with, and then quarterly later once the operation is running smoothly. Does that answer the question?
Yes, as for the most part, is around this table, the bookings of halls is sometimes considered to be cumbersome in terms of the timelines. So I'm not sure how it will roll in, and maybe an entity such as yourself may be more responsive than the larger organization. So it's an interesting model to perceive, and thank you for the comments.
Thank you.
Director Pratt.
Thank you, and thank you, Andy, for the presentation, and to all of the representation for Half Moon Bay in here today. And I think one of my questions is around the operational agreement that you're negotiating with staff right now, and being a volunteer organization. I wonder if you can speak to because it is an onerous agreement to be taking on as an organization, and if you can speak to how you look at that going forward, and with succession planning within your own organization to maintain a long-term operational agreement with the regional district. That would be, if you've put, like that bigger picture, that long-term decades piece, or even shorter term.
So I'd like to make a comment there, and then I would ask Linda or Don to jump in with their view of that answer as well. In the last little while, our community association has become certainly a more substantial and more structured, rigorous organization, shall we say, and we anticipate that that's the normal for this organization now. So as far as, yes, succession planning, we have a fantastic board of people. We have a number of people who would like to be on our board, and we don't know how to prioritize and structure that. So we see the future of our organization, our ability to fulfill this operation in the long term as well secured. But I'd be happy with either Linda or Don to chime in.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm Don Cunliffe. We have, I guess best to say, working with Shelley, a draft agreement on how this would work in a short-term and a long-term basis. To answer your question directly, I believe that individuals such as myself and other board members who have been on the board now for a number of years have some skills and abilities here to do this through either our business backgrounds or through just being directors of community associations, of which I am a director of 2 community associations in Half Moon Bay, 2 not-for-profits that is, and the past president of another one. And we have structured an agreement, a draft agreement, let me emphasize that goes forward starting from year 1 through year probably 5, 6 right now, and believe that it has some substance to it, meaning that we've looked at the market out there, we've looked at the pros and cons of other facilities on the coast, and through that thinking, we've got some pretty good ideas how we would manage this operation. So if that's enough, or I can take more questions, thank you. Sure.
I think if you're, I'm Linda McMahon, President. I think if you're referring to the age of some of the board members, and perhaps we want to move on to, greener pastures, we, in the last couple of weeks, have had an influx of people raising their hand to be on the board. They are of a younger generation, so I'm pretty sure that in terms of our succession, that we're going to have the younger members of the community coming in and filling in when those of us have served our term.
It's not about age, it's about volunteer burnout. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. The regional district has a number of halls right now. District of Sechelt has a number of halls. None of them make any money. We have staff who work with them, try and market them. They don't make any money. They're subsidized. I come from Calgary. That's my background. I was a president of the community association out there. We were the only one in the whole city of Calgary who retained our community hall. It was a lot of work, a lot of effort, and it was always pinching pennies. We did not get grants. What I noticed in this report is that it's indicating that it's identifying potentially $30,000 a year. That means that the level of engagement, level of commitment on part of the community has to be high and has to maintain that level of action and work in the community association. Otherwise, it'll be coming back to the SCRD and the other electoral areas to support the shortfall. So yes, volunteers are great. I mean, I was part of that. It's a lot of work. And I don't know how that would be maintained over the years. The $30,000 that's indicated in here does not include capital renewal, which would also need to be included. So, we're looking at having the SCRD commit to a hall that we know is going to cost money, and all the directors, the electoral area directors, would be committing their residents to supporting Half Moon Bay in this proposal. So. It's not just about Half Moon Bay, right? It's a much bigger conversation. So I don't know what you'd say to that around the commitment in your community.
Thanks for that question. I'm not sure if it was a question. I do have a couple of mentions. One thing which I did not mention in the presentation, because of the nature of Half Moon Bay, it's a reasonable sized place. 3,000 residents is a significant proportion of the entire CRD. Without the facilities which frankly are available elsewhere, people get in their cars every day and drive to Sechelt, and they use, whether we're talking halls, whether they're SCRD or Sechelt, District of Sechelt properties or privately held properties, they drive and they use what there is in Sechelt. As all of our communities grow, that just means that more and more of the burden for the entertainment and the satisfaction of the needs of Half Moon Bay people are going to be on Sechelt. We don't, for a lot of things, we don't drive to Pender Harbour or Gibsons. We drive to Sechelt. That's where we go. So, but there's this built-up need to be our community to be a community. We don't feel like we're a community because you could say we're a bedroom community of Sechelt in a fashion. As far as the cost goes, that's an estimate. It's not finalized, but staff included it because it needs to be visible. It's a possibility. It's offset by, we believe, at least some costs which will not be incurred by SCRD staff. They won't be doing the booking. We have not, as far as I recall, we haven't sort of tried to estimate what amount of costs are deferred because we're taking on the operation of it. But it's not, we're actually removing the need for support for maintenance contracts and those kind of things from, so there's, all of the booking people, the HR people, the legal people don't have to deal with that because we're dealing with it on behalf of the SCRD.
Thank you. Follow-up?
So follow-up. So 3,000 people. The community that I belong to had 30,000 people, and we broke even with our hall, right? So I don't know if the 3,000 is a deep enough pool to provide the support for this. So, I mean, I wonder how it will, I mean, you've got a backstop, you've got the SCRD backstopping, and is that what we're looking at doing? Is that financially viable, financially sustainable for the Sunshine Coast? I don't know. And that's assuming that other properties aren't necessarily going to be built. And I think there are rumors out there that others are going to be built in other areas. So then you'll have other competition. So I question it, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Well, I can't resist putting my oar in when it comes to operating agreements and stuff. I actually, some of the halls are successfully operated by volunteer groups like Davis Bay and Roberts Creek and the curling club in Gibsons. They've successfully operated an entire curling rink for years. So I think there's merit. It would be interesting if this project should go ahead to explore a shared booking platform for all of the community halls on the coast, because right now it's just a dog's breakfast. Like, you have to know that you go to Kenmac Auto Parts to book the Kinsman Hall in Gibsons. Like, who knows this? I was told, oh, well, if you live here a long time, you know that. But, that is not a system in my view. So I'm just putting that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I don't see any other hands up from directors for our delegation. So unless you guys have anything else. Any questions on the staff report before we?
No, as I understand, as attendees, we will have an opportunity to ask questions about the staff report later anyway.
At the end of the meeting,
yes,
is the opportunity to ask questions. So if your organization as a partner had any questions that they wanted to ask now, that would be all right.
No, I think we're okay.
Okay.
As is.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. All right. Moving on to Annex B, item number 4, Cooper's Green Hall Replacement Project, construction budget update. We'll turn this over to staff. CAO McKinley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. GM Gagnon will be giving a bit of a formal introduction to the item at hand, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments from the perspective of how did we get here today to be faced with this situation. And some of this happened before I started. If I look back through the record at the December 2018 board direction, where the board supported moving forward with an application for a grant for this hall. Up to that point, a lot of positive work had been done by community members and people dedicated to try to move this project forward. And after that 2018 December board direction, a lot of collaborative work was done between staff, the community association, getting ready for the grant. And actually in only a year and a half, that application was put together, and by July of 2020, the grant was approved, and we were ready to move forward with further work, further consultation, and try to get this project forward. As a person that used to work at a funding organization that funded large projects, that went pretty smoothly. December 2018 to July 2020 went pretty smoothly, and there was a lot of positive work done. By July 2020, of course, the world had changed. We didn't know to what extent it had changed in July of 2020, and things still look pretty good for the project moving forward more or less as planned. Since that time, staff and the association and everyone has still worked very positively to move this forward, but the impacts of that massive change that occurred in 2020 are really starting to become apparent. They have driven costs up exponentially, they've made it harder to do things, and it hasn't gotten better, it continues to get more challenging. And at the end of the day, that's why you're faced with difficult decisions before you today. It isn't because a lot of good work wasn't done. It wasn't because there wasn't a lot of good collaboration. Those were the things that were in our control that I think we can feel pretty proud of. The things that are completely out of our control, those are what's driving what is probably a very difficult decision before you today. That's all I wanted to say to start with. I'll turn it over to Shelley.
Morning, Chair, committee members, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. In regards to the Cooper's Green Hall replacement report that's in front of you this morning, I just want to remind everyone that SCRD community halls all fall within functional area 650 or our park services, which means that the service participants include area A, B, D, E, and F only. At the June 24th, 2021 Corporate and Administrative Services Committee meeting, in regards to this project, staff were directed to reinitiate the design process and include net zero readiness, to update the project cost estimate following the preparation of construction drawings, to prepare a project update for future committee meetings, and to report on future committee meetings for a tendering and project cost control strategies. Since that time, staff have been working with the architect to complete the detailed design, including zero net readiness. Given that 4 years had passed since the last Class B estimate was completed, as well as the volatility of the current market conditions, prior to moving forward with construction drawings, another Class B estimate was initiated, enabling staff to update the project budget. As outlined in the report, the estimated project budget now exceeds the approved budget to a degree where cost containment strategies are insufficient. Staff are unable to tender a project without sufficient budget in place and are therefore seeking board direction on how to proceed. Staff have done their best to outline several options for the board, as well as considerations for each of those options. Report authors CFO Tina Perot, Project Manager Kyle Doyle, and I are here to answer any questions you might have. And we are also joined by Craig Burns from Principal Architect in the gallery in the Zoom gallery, in the event that there are questions that are more technical in nature that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Gagnon. Directors, any questions? Director Pratt, I see you reaching for your hand.
Yes, I'm reaching for my hands. I have a series of questions, and I know the other directors do as well, so you may, Chair, you may wish to intersperse mine with theirs. As everyone, I mean, I think our mouths all dropped when we saw the new cost estimate. So looking at that funding shortfall, in regards to DCCs, can those be used for Cooper's Green, for example, with a couple of the other developments that are happening in Half Moon Bay right now?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So development cost charges are mandated through legislation, and so community amenities and parks do not necessarily qualify. Parks in lieu as part of a development is part of the Local Government Act. However, a community hall would not be part of that, so it would not qualify, and the regional district would not be authorized to request for any funding from a developer for this purpose.
Follow-up, Director Pratt.
Note that my follow-up was how much we could ask for DCCs, but that's obviously not an appropriate one. Like I said, I have a list of questions, so I can just rattle on through them or go to another director.
I see Director Ties' hand up, so we'll go to him and come back.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so going back to the question I had earlier, I have a really hard time wrapping my head around $981 a square foot. It's just to give perspective. I mean, I built a house in 2016. That was 5-6 years ago now. So it's a while, but it's got higher end finishes than what I've seen on the plans of the community hall, and it was considerably like a third per square foot of what we're looking at right now. So I just don't understand where we get to $981 a square foot for a fairly simple build And so I just want to know if there's any justification of that. I've consulted a builder that's building right now, and he said, yeah, he's still not building at that rate, and he's building high-end homes, so which are more complex and probably more expensive than what we're looking at here. So it's something that I have a really hard time wrapping my head around. Thanks.
Thank you. GM Gagnon?
Thank you for the question. The best thing would be to test the market, but I can't go to market without insufficient budget. So the next best thing is to try and update your project budget to be as close as is accurately possible. And so what was done was we utilized the same cost consultant that we utilized in 2018 to do a cost estimate based on an almost complete detailed design. So we are in a position where that was as close as it was going to get to, other than construction drawings, to actually give the cost estimate. Same cost consultant, so we're comparing apples to apples. The architect and our project manager did a great job of making sure that we were being prudent with the materials that were included in the cost strategy or the cost estimate. And all I can tell you is that's what it came in at. Now I know cost consultants out there are being very careful right now at what they put their name behind because of the volatility of the market. So there's all sorts of comments on the cost containment strategy around contingencies and volatility of market and risk, which is one of the reasons that staff have suggested an extra 10% contingency because of that. So all I can say is that we used professionals, the same one, so it is an apple to apple, and this is what they're telling us. But the best test would be to get the construction drawings done and get out to market and tender it, because there's social procurement, there's all sorts of different options that might come back in with the bids. But I did not feel it was prudent of staff to go that far, knowing that we were that far out at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Director Ties, or are you okay for now?
Well, I guess the only issue I have with that is I don't know if we can use a different consultant and come up with a different number, but if somebody that's bidding for the project sees the staff reports, they're going to come close to what the estimates come in at, because that's where the budget's at. So I just think that if we take it out to tender, everybody's going to bid too high, and so we've kind of dug the grave that we're going to sit in, that we're going to throw ourselves into. So it's yeah, it's just something that I'm looking at and I'm going, this doesn't make sense to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the deadline on the ICIP grant. Right now it's March 31st, 2025. Is it possible to get that extended?
Thank you for the question. Again, staff is just putting in front of you what we know today. So we certainly could request that of the grantor, and that would be, I don't know what their answer would be, but we could certainly put in that request.
Follow-up, go ahead.
Based on the collective experience here, is that a possibility?
I don't think that I can answer that, Director Lee. I think that's a question that only the granting body can answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Couldn't get you to commit, huh?
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I have two pieces. One, in your opening remarks, you indicated that we cannot go to tender until we have the funding in place, like how we're going to pay for it. We're not going to go out to tender. We can't do that. So then one of the proposals put forward by our delegation was to look for other grants. We run into two issues there. One is, as Director Lee indicated, the deadline on using the first group, first piece of money, the grant that we got. But then we also see that if we apply for other grants, they have a timeline by which they come back to us. So if we don't have the funding in place, we're going out for additional grants. That means we're pushing the tendering out even further till we've had those secured funds. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. So the answer is you are correct. And I would also like to add that previous staff reports, no different from what we're presenting today, have said we'll explore other things. There could be more donations that come in. There could be another grant, although those are tricky due to the stacking rules. We really are in a bit of a corner in terms of our stacking rules with ISIP. But there are options that staff continue and will continue to explore. But in order for us to move forward, we need a commitment around a budget. And so whether the bids come in lower, whether we find cost containment strategies to save money throughout the project, we actually need to move or not. And so if we were to move, we need to know that we've got a budget behind the value put in front of you today. That could come down if we were to secure some other form of funding, but we can't go without a commitment. Thank you.
So what you're saying is if we wanted to go to tender right now, we would need to know where we're getting the 528, the debt funding, plus where we're getting the 983. That's the gap, the funding gap.
You are correct. So what staff has put in front of you today is a project budget gap of new gap of 900 and some odd $1,000. Sorry, glasses don't work with fine print. We also, I note on page, I want to get this page right, page 8 of the report, that we are suggesting an extra 10% contingency given the volatility, which actually makes the funding gap close to $1.5 million. And so, yes, we are suggesting in option 1 provides options for how that funding could be achieved in order to move forward today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is around the ICIP grant again. Originally, the grant was for more than we needed, so they had a cap of 73.33%. Now, with this budget, it's I'm not sure if it's 55% or 68%, but anyways, the maximum amount of the grant doesn't meet the 73.33% anymore. Could we top it up with gas tax legally?
So staff reached out to the grantor, and the answer is no. And the reason being is the best example was a roof, for example. You can't split a roof in half. And so it's essentially part of the context of the context of the application. You can't split up the different pieces of the application that makes the project. So even though your project budget has come up, you can't split different components. The other thing too is we're now speaking a very, very basic type of build. And the application reflected that. There's nothing really more that we could do. Staff went through line by line to see which things we could remove out of the budget to be eligible for other sources of funding. And that's included in the report as well, and that's where that 400,000 comes in.
Just before I continue down my speakers list, I'm going to jump in with sort of a follow-up. Recognizing, this number is the total project budget. From a process perspective, when we take this out to tender, do we have the ability to look at making some of these items optional? Could we build the structure for the kitchen, but not actually equip the commercial kitchen, but it could be an option that somebody could bid on? Is there any opportunity to try and sort of pull back when it goes to bid? We had this similar situation in Sechelt where we put our runway lighting out to tender, and we had a whole ton of extra add-ons like spare parts and things like that we wanted done that brought the project in way over, but all the tenders came back way over budget. But when we stripped those back and made them sort of optional bid items, it actually came back at a lower cost that we could move forward with. So I'm just wondering process-wise how that tender goes out or yeah, thank you.
So there's lots of options. Thank you for the question. There's lots of options. I do want to point out a couple of things. In the report, it does identify a cost savings that's already been identified of 83,000, I believe it was. And that's related to a piece that we could strip out and could easily, or could be funded in a different way. So that's already been moved out, and that's related to the finishing of the exterior ground level patio. The only thing that's really left in the building that could be removed as part of, like, right from the start and try to fund it other ways is the actual commercial equipment itself, which is around $70,000 that we could remove. We left it in because it's a critical piece of how the operations of the building is intended to go, but it is a piece that could be left from a cost containment strategy and removed. There's just not a lot left. So in terms of the whole, the social piece, the in-kind, that all has to be front and center in the procurement process, which we will absolutely be looking at with our procurement department. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, staff, for the report. And the community associations. One of the things I've seen is that a term is 4 years, and to get a project going that is a multi-term project, you need the community support and you need policy behind you. And I think the SCRD has that policy, and the community support is there. So I am definitely trending to option one at this point, just to let you know. And it's this uncertainty. I think the $1 million estimate in 2015 was rose-colored glasses, I think someone suggested, and maybe the glasses weren't even on, maybe even. And so SCRD has some Manager Moransk, Stephen, who has helped out with the estimating, I believe. Is that he's been involved? Has he had some oversight?
Sorry, Director Hiltz, Manager Missouriak?
Yes,
Steven?
has he been involved in kind of assisting with the capital projects?
So our project manager for this is Manager Kyle Doyle,
okay,
who is being mentored
right, okay,
by Manager Missouriak. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
So the general principle is, I think there's some good staff people behind this, is what I'm trying to say, and so there continues to be risk. And there is uncertainty. Even if we say yes to this and we go for tender, there is still another decision. It isn't shovels in the ground. So it's this kind of iterative process that I'm getting used to. It takes years to move these things so at this point, the question for me is, would the citizens in Area F expect me to say yes or no to this? And at this point, they haven't been telling me no. And so my best judgment is to keep moving it forward. So that's kind of where and the uncertainty, that's just why we're making the decision and the staff are not making the decision. So the testing of the market is the thing that needs to be done. And we're still not there. I'm not sure when it will get built, but that's kind of where I'm heading towards. Option one is the risk, the community, the policy is there. It's not going to get in this term. You got to keep chipping away at it and moving it forward. And when the federal government throws in $2 million and we're aligning with the federal government, that seems to say that we're kind of going in the right direction. Because that's also what happened in Grantham's Hall, is the federal government come in there and put some money into it. So you're going in the right direction. So from a top down, I think we're going in the right direction. So that's why I'm tending towards option one at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. Another concern, and I've voiced it before, but I don't think it's ever been appropriately addressed, is sea level rise. And I'd like to see a long-term asset for the community, something that will be the age of Grantham's Hall one day, and something that will be the age of Roberts Creek Hall one day. And the location that I see there right now is threatened by sea level rise. And I just I don't see, well, I haven't been shown that that's not the case. So I'm worried. I'd rather see that hall in a different location, somewhere in Half Moon Bay. And so far, I haven't seen evidence to the contrary. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know if staff have any comments about the sea level rise portion. GM Gagnon?
Thank you, and thank you for the comment, Director Ties. All I can suggest is that we do have geotechnicals on board, and we do have a geotechnical report from 2018 that gives us 100-year FCL flood construction level information that has been considered in the design. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pratt?
Thank you. So one of the questions that has come up around the ICIP grant was whether or not we can ask for more, and if that's a possibility.
Thank you for the question. My understanding is there's no intake right now for that grant, and that we have the value we have. And in conversation, which I believe CFO Perot had, is there is no money available at this point in time.
Thank you. The program funds have been expended. Follow-up, Director Seegers?
I actually raised this yesterday with the constituency assistant on the Sunshine Coast, because we're seeing this and they're seeing this in a number of projects across the country. There's no answer at this point, but they are going to go back and see if there are other funds that could be available, because we're not the only ones in this situation. So no answer yet, but they're looking at it.
Thank you for that. Director McMahon?
I was going to speak to staff's recommendations, but if there are more questions first, perhaps we should get through the questions.
I see Director Lee's hand up.
I was waiting for Director McMahon, so I wasn't quite ready. Thank you, Chair. I have a question and then a comment. So my first question is there's a 26,000 Bear Creek amenity anticipated 2022 contribution. Is that an ongoing amenity that we could perhaps use each year?
So there is an agreement between Bear Creek Hydro and the regional district. However, it isn't anything that we can enforce if they didn't necessarily pay it. So as far as a reliable source of ongoing funding, I would be reluctant to commit to that. However, it can be revisited if we receive the funds each year. It could supplement a debt payment, for instance, and reduce the burden onto the taxpayers. And of course, that's going to be our strategy all the way, is how can we mitigate that?
Follow-up, Director Lee?
No, thank you. My thoughts are very similar to Director Hiltz, of course, except I did want to point out the uniqueness of that location and the public access to a large stretch of open ocean, and the importance it does have to our Seashell Nation. And our friend Keith was working on that original study group and was all in favor of the building there and the opportunity to display Seashell heritage. To me, it's a unique opportunity. We're fast losing waterfront to private individuals such as me, and we have to be very cognizant of that and use it appropriately and use it to attract business and people to our coast. So I think this is a unique opportunity we just simply can't pass up. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Director Lee. I don't see any other. Director Hiltz, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just a question on the staff report, the benefits over the short term versus the long year. And the simple one, as I see it, is long term just costs you more in interest and That's kind of the simple decision of why to go with short-term aside from the elector assent aspect of it. Is that a summary? Shorter is faster and is less interest?
Well, yeah, staff tried to provide consistent information based on past board direction. And so past board direction was to do a short-term loan. Staff are in continuing conversations with the ministry and the Municipal Finance Authority as far as the appropriateness between short-term and long-term and electoral approval. So we continue to have those conversations up until this afternoon. I have a meeting with the Municipal Finance Authority. And so at this point, we still believe the recommendation within option 1 is appropriate at this time. If we find out otherwise, then we'll most certainly bring further information. I think there's a lot of caveats, as already been mentioned, which is there's other sources of funding potentially available, and what we end up at the end as far as what the debt funding will be, we never know until the very end of a project. However, we do have to have a commitment in order to go out into the bid community in good faith, and to allow for the electorate and the public to understand what they're committing to as far as a potential tax burden. So again, we provided those two options. I think it really depends on your philosophy on money management, whether or not you pay for short-term gain, long-term, but most certainly, there is justification. This asset has, different components have anywhere between a 15 to 40-year life cycle. So, long-term debt could be justified. However, you do, because of the duration of it, will end up paying a large interest. Again, must be mentioned, short-term borrowing is variable. And in these market conditions, everybody very attuned to what's going on in the economy at the moment. We don't have a crystal ball as to what short-term rates are going to be when we complete this project. Inflation over Canada was up to 7%. We finally caught up to the US. So I don't know where it's going to go, and so we do have that in the bag. So there's lots of risks associated with the borrowing component, but again, we will continue to strive to find other sources of funding.
Thank you, CFO Perot. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 7 in the report, under other related site planning items, it talks about parking and management strategy, hall and boat ramp parking. How will those be addressed? Because they're not currently part of this project.
You are correct. What is part of the project is an allotment for parking to address the needs of the building as per required. What is not is that whole parking strategy, and that was a separate resolution from the board for staff to look at. So we have started that work with the civil engineer, just doing some conceptual around what that would look like, but we've stopped it until we know kind of where this is going. Should option 1 be pursued, we would carry on with that work, but it would be a separate budget proposal that comes forward to address those items. It could be looked at as a phased approach, but the planning has not yet been completed, which is why it's noted in here as potentially a separate cost that comes forward in the future. Thank you.
So currently we have not budgeted for that work?
That is correct. We have a budget to be able to do the planning, but we don't have a budget to actually do any of the work that may be a result of the plan. We have a small amount in the construction budget for Cooper's Green to address the parking requirements of the hall itself, but not the larger strategy of the park.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so Director McMahon.
Oh, good. I have a few remarks prepared, those terrifying words. I just wanted to first thank the Community Association for a top-notch presentation. You guys are so well organized and so articulate. As everybody knows, I have opposed this project, and for full details, you can read my website. I'm not going to rehash everything I've said before. Basically, this hall is out of scale and scope with our other community halls. We just saw a presentation from the Disc Golf Group, whose $4,000 proposal is not supported by staff on the grounds that there's no park management plan. Well, there's no community hall management plan or policy on the part of the SCRD. For historical reasons, 2 areas have 2 halls each. One hall area has 1 hall, and 2 areas have no halls, supported by the SCRD, and nobody's ever, made a plan or any rationale for why this should be. This proposed hall is almost 3 times the size of any existing hall, and the net operating costs, as shown in the report, are likely higher than all of the other 4 halls combined. So, like I say, I'm not going to rehash that. What I want to go over right now is my view on the options proposed by staff. So, option number 1, I oppose it, obviously, but it has the virtue of being a clear and decisive recommendation. Option 2, going to AAP, is worse, in my view. I'm completely opposed to this. The purpose of the alternate approval process is as a cheaper and faster alternative to public referendum for projects that are expected to have strong voter support, such as the Church Road water expansion process. I looked up the BC government's guide to AAP processes, and it says, when the public has been actively engaged and there are reasonable indications that citizens are in favor, the proposal may lend itself better to an AAP rather than to assent voting. My area has not been engaged in this project. The Half Moon Bay residents are pretty much aware of it, I would say, but my area residents are not aware of it, and they're not aware that they are going to be expected to fund this project. If this went to a public referendum, it might have quite a hard time winning the support of the voters in areas A, D, E, and F. I'm already hearing complaints from quite a few people about soaring utility bills and taxes. And I've said before, and it's true, I'm willing to go to the wall to defend tax increases for critical infrastructure, like water and fire departments. But I have a much harder time with recreation that's already about 40% of our tax bill. Option 3, which is to shrink the project to fit the budget, is also, in my opinion, a really bad option. Redesigning a build as you go is like a fool's game. You risk winding up with a bunch of redesign costs and some horrible compromise of a building that leaves everybody unhappy. We played that game with the recreation center in Gibsons, and we're still living with the consequences. So if we're going to build this hall, it should be built right. Option 4 is to kick the can down the road. This board, in our happy heyday, we were the recipients of a bunch of these cans, and we swore we wouldn't go there. However, I have to say that at least in this case, the consequences are modest compared to delaying critical infrastructure like water supply or landfill. So, with some reluctance and compassion for the Half Moon Bay Community Association, I end up supporting option 5, or at the risk of giving our corporate officer a heart attack, option 6, which is going to public referendum. The fundamental problem I see here is that this is a project whose time has come and gone. It's a vision of a past era. But the post-World War II prosperity party is over in North America. We're now in an era of climate emergencies, rising economic equality, and global supply chain meltdowns. Over in Europe, they seem to be starting World War III. We had World War II. Director Hiltz talked about waterfront locations. I have one. I have water, and it's rising. I foresee that the management plan for Chaster Park is going to involve managed retreat from the park and from Chaster House. A number of people wrote to the board saying that they would like to see their children or grandchildren married in the new hall. Unfortunately, when I picture this, I see everyone holding a lovely wedding and then those children leaving the coast because there's nowhere here that young working families can afford to live anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Directors, any other questions, comments? Director Ties.
Yes, thank you. I'm much aligned with Director McMahon on some of these issues. Sea level rise being a big concern. The cost per square foot is a big concern. The risk to the taxpayers in general is a big concern. I think there's some optimistic thinking that that the bill will not be as big as it looks like right now, but I think that's just optimistic thinking at this point. And so, yeah, I am also opposed to option one. I'm along Director McMahon's lines on option two because my area has not been consulted in an adequate way. And if they're going to be footing the bill for up to $1.4 million on a capital outlay, plus ongoing maintenance costs of potentially of unknown dimensions, then they need to be consulted further. And I am, however, in support of option three, potentially at a different location, which of course probably doesn't make a lot of people happy, but I do think that, you know, Half Moon Bay deserves a community hall. But I'm not in favor of option four just because it's not, I'm somewhat opposed to being just passing the buck on, especially because I'm not running again, and that means that I'm dodging the issue, and that's I'm not I'm willing to stand up for what I believe in, and that's so. And option five is not something that I would like to endorse either, because I do think that Half Moon Bay deserves a community hall. So, it's a difficult one, and option six, at the risk of creating a heart attack, is also not something that I'd like to see, but certainly an AAP needs more consultation than what we've seen so far. So those are my thoughts on this, and happy to pass it on to somebody else now.
Thank you, Director Ties. I wonder if the corporate officer would be interested in speaking to the non-existent on the paper option six.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. So with respect to the legislative timeline, option six is a possibility. So we still have time to seek approval, ministerial approval, to move forward with a referendum in alignment with the local general election. And I won't have a heart attack.
Thank you. Director Ties, your hand is still up. Do you have a follow-up? Okay. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. So the cost is astounding, and this is why I will forever be in favor of design build projects where you have your budget ahead of time and you fit within the budget that you have. However, we're not there. We started the process differently when it was started in 2014 with the design of the Cooper's Green Management Plan all the way through to 2018 when we accepted that plan, and the grant that we received from the government was based on a design that had already been completed. So we're beyond that, but I have to say that because I've been part of that in a government setting with Gibson's Elementary. When we really built that, we knew what our budget was. We were able to ask for things within that budget and have requests or have proposals come in. So we can't revisit the past. We are where we are now. We're in a situation where we are now. Nobody could have predicted in 2014 about global pandemics and supply shortages and the potential of WW3 happening and everything else that has happened in our world. So we are where we are, and in order to move forward on this, we have to provide a budget to staff and direction to staff so we can move forward. I don't like the budget. I don't like that high of a number because it is, and nobody does, because it obligates not only the community association, but it obligates all of our electors and all of our residents and taxpayers within the electoral areas. So I take that. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep on this, and it's a big issue. But yet I know how necessary a hall is for our community, and I think back to the Seaside Shuffle and the energy, and I know the want in the community for a gathering space. I do hope numbers get refined further, because when you're looking at 987 per square foot, when a hospital, one of my friends happens to be in the middle of building a hospital right now, and the hospital per square footage cost to build is like between $500 and $600. So just as an anecdotal piece, that's what they're looking at. And so I think there's a way of refining that, but until we move forward with an option and give staff direction, we're not going to be able to test the market, and that's what we need to do next. So with that, I am going to throw an option out on the floor, and I'm going to throw option 1 out on the floor. And as I'm going to motivate that the Cooper's Green Hall replacement project budget be increased by 1.411980 for a total project cost of up to $4.5 million. And then the rest of the information there that is on page 11 of the report.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Do I have a seconder? I do have a seconder, so that's on the floor. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I was just going to follow up on Sherry's comment. I know during budget review we were asking whether or not we could still do a referendum coming up at the upcoming election, and she went away to check. So you indicated that yes, there is still time should the directors want to go to referendum at the October 15th of this year. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, from legislative perspective, the timeline is available to us to bring a loan authorization bylaw forward to the province to seek permission to run an assent vote in alignment with the election. What we've yet to contemplate, though, are the implications departmentally for, say, the Community Services Department. As well, there will be financial implications to running an assent vote. So we've yet to draft a budget or to fully contemplate that process. But there is still time to do that should the board give us direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have all sorts of questions about the assent voting, but it's not germane to the motion that's on the floor, so I'll follow up later. Directors, any other comments or questions related to the motion that's on the floor? If not, I will call the question, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Director McMahon and Director Ties, did you want your votes recorded? Yes for Director McMahon, yes for Director Ties. Thank you. That motion is carried. Is there anything else from directors? Director Pratt, you look like you want to speak. No? You're good?
I think I've said my piece. It's going to be a lot of work going forward, and it's, as we've heard, it's a multi-term project. So whether or not I'm in this role going forward, I've obligated myself to continue with this motion. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't see any other hands up from directors, and that concludes that item. We have no communications. We have no in-camera session. So I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Questions from the gallery, if any? Looking at our participants list online. I don't see any hands up. If you're participating electronically, you can raise your hand and I will give you permission to speak and you can ask a question. If you're here in the room, you can just raise a hand and we'll get you to come up to the microphone and ask a question if you've got it. Anything from the newspaper? Could you, just for, yeah, thank you.
Because this is an electoral area services committee, just procedurally, this decision to choose option A has to also go to board next, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's just a recommendation to the board, which I suspect the recommendation will be pulled for a separate consideration, which means it'll be voted on by electoral area directors at board as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, so thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at the next meeting.